Parker Hayes didn't expect that buying a $5 bouquet from the corner stand would change his life, but it did. Rain clung to his jacket as he huddled under the awning, gripping a plastic-wrapped bunch of daisies in one hand and his 4-year-old daughter's tiny mittened hand in the other. "Daddy, can we go home now?" Sadie asked, her big brown eyes blinking up at him. "Just one more minute, Bug," he murmured. "Someone needs these more than we do." He didn't know why he'd bought them. He could barely afford groceries this week. But something in his gut pulled him to the flower stand outside the hospital, where he just dropped off a resume for a second janitorial job he wasn't even sure he'd get. Then he saw her. She sat on the bench near the hospital entrance, soaked from the rain, her dark hair clinging to her cheeks, her hands twisting in her lap like she didn't know what to do with them. Her eyes were hollow, the kind of hollow that only comes from losing someone you loved more than yourself. Without thinking, Parker walked over and gently held out the flowers. "They're for you," he said. "I know it's not much, but I thought maybe you could use something nice today." She blinked up at him, startled. "I what?" He shrugged like it didn't matter, even though his heart was pounding. "You look like you could use a reason to smile, that's all." She stared at him for a second too long, like she hadn't had a stranger say something kind in a while. Then she took the flowers, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you." "Come on, Sadie," Parker said, giving her hand a squeeze and nodding at the woman before walking off into the rain again. He thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 days later, she showed up at the diner where he worked nights, wearing a navy blue coat and holding the same bouquet of daisies, now dried and pressed between pages of a book. "You forgot to leave your name," she said, standing at the counter while he poured coffee for a table of truckers. He blinked at her. "You came here to find me." "Yeah," she said. "I wanted to thank you properly. I was at the hospital because I just lost my brother. You were the only person who saw me that day, really saw me." He wiped his hands on a towel and offered a small smile. "I'm Parker. That's Sadie." He nodded to the booth where his daughter sat coloring quietly with a stack of crayons and a kid's menu. "I'm Maeve," she said, offering her hand. "Maeve Ellison." From that night on, she kept showing up. Sometimes she brought cookies for Sadie. Sometimes she just ordered tea and read from her book. Once, she asked Parker if he'd eaten dinner and handed him a paper bag with lasagna tucked inside. He didn't know what to do with someone so kind. "I can't figure you out," he told her one night as they stood outside the diner. She'd waited until his shift ended just to walk with him and Sadie 3 blocks home. "Why do you need to?" she asked. "Because nobody sticks around when they see what my life looks like." She looked down at Sadie, who was asleep in his arms, her head resting on his shoulder. Then she looked back at him. "I see what your life looks like," she said softly, "and I'm still here." Over the next few weeks, Maeve became part of their routine. She'd meet them at the park on Saturdays with a bag of muffins and a thermos of hot chocolate. She'd help Sadie build snowmen and laugh when Parker slipped on the ice. She stayed late at the diner sometimes, reading to Sadie while Parker mopped the floors after closing. One night, after tucking Sadie into bed, Parker came out to find Maeve cleaning up the kitchen without asking. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I want to," she replied, wiping her hands and turning to face him. "You do everything alone. Let someone help for once." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I'm not used to this." "I know," she said, "but maybe you should be." There was a beat of silence. "Why me?" he asked suddenly. "Why us?" Maeve walked over and looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because you saved me when I was falling apart, and now I want to be the one who lifts you up." He didn't kiss her that night, but he wanted to. 3 months later, Parker was late picking Sadie up from her preschool. He rushed in, breathless, only to find Maeve already there, crouched beside Sadie with her backpack in her lap. "She was scared when you didn't show," Maeve said gently, standing up as Parker approached. "I'm sorry," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Double shift, I lost track of time." Maeve placed a hand on his arm. "You're doing your best." He looked at her, tired and grateful. "I don't know what we'd do without you." She smiled. "Luckily, you don't have to find out." He didn't realize how much he needed her until the night Sadie got sick. Maeve was at their door before he could even ask, taking over the thermometer, the medicine, the lullabies. At one point, Parker stood in the hallway, watching her rock Sadie in her arms like she was born to be her mother. He swallowed hard. That was the moment he knew. He was falling for her. Not slowly, not carefully. All at once. The first time Maeve stayed the night, it wasn't planned. Sadie had finally fallen asleep after a long, fevered night, her breathing steadier, her cheeks less flushed. Parker rubbed his eyes as he came out of her room, only to find Maeve curled up on the couch with a blanket he didn't even remember giving her. "You should have gone home," he said quietly, lowering himself into the armchair across from her. "I wasn't going to leave her like that," Maeve replied, voice thick with exhaustion. "Or you." Outside, dawn was just beginning to bleed across the skyline, painting the tops of the buildings with a dull orange hue. Inside, the apartment was still and heavy, with the kind of silence that only follows a storm. Parker studied her face for a long moment. "You're not scared off yet." Maeve didn't answer right away. Then she looked over at him, her eyes soft but unreadable. Why would it be? He wanted to tell her because this life wasn't easy, because he didn't have time for dates or brunches or lazy Sunday mornings. But he didn't say any of that. He just nodded, stood up, and grabbed a pillow from the hallway closet. "You can take the bed," he said. "I'll sleep out here." Maeve's expression didn't change. "I'm fine where I am." Parker hesitated, then set the pillow down beside her. "At least take this." By the time he returned from brushing his teeth, she was asleep, curled around the pillow like she'd always belonged there. After that night, things shifted. It wasn't that Maeve moved in, she didn't. She still had her tiny apartment across town, the one she never invited him to, but she was there more often than not. She'd show up with a bag of groceries on her way home from work or stay late, helping Sadie with her alphabet cards. Sometimes she'd fall asleep on the couch after movie night, her feet tucked under her, a blanket draped over her shoulders. Parker never asked questions. He didn't want to push. But one night, as they sat on the fire escape after Sadie had gone to bed, he finally broke the silence between them. "You never talk about your life," he said, his shoulder brushing hers as he leaned back against the railing. "Not really." Maeve stared out at the dark street below them. "That's because I'm still figuring out what it is without him in it." Parker didn't have to ask who she meant. "I used to have everything planned," Maeve continued. "My brother and I were going to open a gallery together. He was the artist, I was the organizer. We had a whole timeline, a 5-year plan, even a location picked out. Then one phone call, and it all disappeared." Parker didn't speak. He knew better than to fill silence that wasn't his to fix. Maeve turned her head toward him. "You know what it's like to lose something you were building your whole life around." He nodded slowly. "Yes, I do." That was the first night she took his hand and didn't let go. They didn't talk much after that, but they didn't need to. Something had settled between them, something real and unspoken, more honest than any declaration. It wasn't long before Sadie started calling her May. It wasn't prompted. One day, Maeve was helping her tie her sneakers, and Sadie just said it. "Thanks, May." Maeve blinked, surprised. "Is that my new name?" Sadie grinned, missing both front teeth. "It's shorter." Parker caught Maeve's expression as she looked up at him, somewhere between startled and touched. "She doesn't give out nicknames often," he said. "I'll take it," Maeve murmured, brushing a piece of hair behind Sadie's ear. From then on, it was May when Sadie needed help with her backpack, May when she wanted one more bedtime story, May when she scraped her knee and burst into tears. And Parker started to realize something terrifying. He couldn't imagine life without May either. One Friday, Maeve offered to watch Sadie, so Parker could go to a job interview for a better-paying maintenance position at a downtown office building. When he returned, suit jacket slung over one arm, he found the apartment transformed. Maeve had dragged the battered coffee table into the center of the room, laid out a picnic blanket, and arranged a full dinner on top-grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and a chocolate cake with lopsided frosting. Sadie was already seated cross-legged on the blanket, giggling as she showed off a paper crown made from construction paper and glitter glue. "What is all this?" Parker asked, taken aback. Maeve stood up and smoothed her skirt. "Celebration dinner, win or lose." He stared at her, something tightening in his throat. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to," she said simply. "You never give yourself credit, so tonight we do." Sadie tugged his hand. "Daddy, you're the king, May said so." He sat down slowly, allowing her to place the crown on his head. They ate until they were full, talked until the candles flickered low, and laughed until Parker didn't remember the last time he'd felt so light. Later, after Sadie was asleep, he and Maeve stood in the kitchen, washing dishes side by side. "You know," Parker said quietly, "you've done more for us than I know how to thank you for." Maeve didn't look at him. "You don't have to thank me." "I want to," he said, "but I also know I don't have much to offer." She finally turned, drying her hands on a towel. "You think this is about what you can give me?" He met her gaze. "Isn't it?" "No," Maeve said, stepping closer. "This is about what we're building, together." Parker didn't move. "I don't know how to do this." "Neither do I," she whispered, "but think we're figuring it out." And then she kissed him. It wasn't rushed or hesitant, it was sure and quiet and warm. The kind of kiss that didn't ask for permission because it already knew the answer. When she pulled away, she rested her forehead against his. "You're not alone anymore," she said. And for the first time in years, Parker believed it. The first snow of the season came late that year, blanketing the city in a quiet hush that made the streets feel softer, slower. Parker stood at the window of the apartment, watching flakes drift down like confetti as Sadie traced shapes on the glass with her fingertip. Maeve was behind him, carefully folding clean laundry on the couch. Her presence in the apartment had ceased to feel unusual. She moved through the space like she'd always belonged, like she'd carved out a corner of their lives and made it her own without ever asking permission. But something had shifted between them since the kiss in the kitchen. It lingered in the air, unspoken, yet undeniable. "Did you know Sadie's class is doing a winter concert?" Maeve asked, placing a folded shirt on the coffee table. Parker turned from the window. "No, she didn't mention it." "She said she's nervous," Maeve added, glancing toward the girl still tracing on the glass. "She's supposed to sing in front of parents." "She gets shy in crowds," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'll make sure it can get off work." Maeve hesitated. "You don't need to do it alone, you know." "I know," he said, meeting her eyes, "but I'm used to it." "That doesn't mean you have to keep being," she replied, her voice low. He sat beside her, watching as she rolled a pair of socks together. "You've been here almost every day for months, May. I don't think I've ever asked what do you actually do? For work, I mean." She looked up startled. "Why?" "Because you're always available. You never talk about your job. I don't even know what your schedule looks like." Maeve paused, folding her hands in her lap. Freelance, mostly design consulting, some interior work. Pick and choose projects. Parker raised an eyebrow. You make your own schedule. Essentially. That's why you're always around. And because I want to be, she added quickly. He nodded slowly. Do you ever miss it, the gallery you and your brother wanted to open? Her expression faltered. All the time, but I've been thinking about trying again, something smaller, more manageable. With a new partner, he asked. Maybe, she said, voice softer now, or maybe just on my own. Haven't decided yet. Sadie turned from the window then, her cheeks pink from the cold pain. Can May come to the concert too? Maeve smiled, only if your dad's okay with that. Parker's response was immediate, of course. That night after Maeve left, Parker lay awake thinking about what she hadn't said. Her life still felt like a puzzle, pieces missing or rearranged. He didn't push not yet, but he wondered what it would take for her to trust him fully, the way he was beginning to trust her. The concert came a week later. Maeve arrived early, holding 2 paper cups of coffee and a third smaller one with whipped cream and rainbow sprinkles for Sadie. She wore a long navy coat and a scarf wrapped neatly at her neck, her hair tucked under a wool hat. She wanted to wear her sparkly shoes, Parker said, as Sadie bounced between them in the hallway of the school. Made me hunt them down at 6 this morning. Maeve laughed. She looks perfect. They found seats in the middle of the auditorium, surrounded by other parents and the hum of chatter. Parker kept glancing at the stage, his nerves worse than Sadie's. When the curtain finally lifted, and Sadie stepped out in her silver headband and pink tulle dress, he felt his chest tighten with pride. She didn't sing loud, but she sang. And when she spotted them in the crowd, her father and Maeve side by side, she smiled wide enough to light up the room. Afterward, they took pictures in the hallway, Sadie beaming, as she clutched a construction paper snowflake in one hand and Maeve's fingers in the other. You didn't just survive it, Maeve whispered to her. You owned it. Parker caught the look in her eyes, then not just affection, but something deeper, something maternal, something lasting. Later that week, Maeve invited them both to a loft space across town. I want to show you something, she said, unlocking the door to a sunlit room with wide windows and exposed beams. The walls were bare, but the floor was scattered with frames, color samples, and a few sculptures wrapped in linen. Yours? Parker asked, stepping cautiously inside. I'm leasing it, she said. It's not much yet, but it's a start. He turned in a slow circle. This is the gallery. It will be, she said, her eyes gleaming. Small, local artists, rotating shows, a space for people who don't have connections but have something to say. Sadie wandered off to the far end of the loft, touching the edge of a canvas with curiosity. Parker looked back at Maeve. Why show us this? Because you're part of why I finally did it, she said. Stopped waiting for things to be perfect and just started. He stepped closer. You're building something again. With people who matter this time. He didn't kiss her then, but he took her hand and she didn't let go. As winter deepened, so did everything between them. They celebrated Sadie's birthday with a homemade cake that collapsed in the middle and a paper crown Parker made from leftover wrapping paper. Maeve gave her a used telescope, slightly scuffed but functional, and stayed up late showing her constellations through the window. One night after Parker returned from a late shift, he found Maeve asleep on the couch, Sadie curled beside her, both of them wrapped in the same blanket. He didn't wake them. He just stood there, staring, holding the doorknob with one hand and the weight of something unfamiliar in his chest. I hope. But not everything stayed simple. One evening after dinner, Parker noticed a letter tucked into the mail pile. Decorative crest, heavy paper. What's this? He asked, holding it up as Maeve dried dishes. She glanced at it, then turned back to the sink. An invitation. To what? My family's holiday gala. He paused. You're still on their list. I'm still their daughter, she said lightly, even if I don't fit their mold anymore. Parker opened the envelope, brows lifting at the gold embossing. This looks fancy. It is. You going? She hesitated. They invited me out of obligation, and because they want to parade me around in something expensive and pretend everything's fine. He looked at her carefully. Do they know about me? No, she admitted. They don't know about any of this. Parker set the letter down. Why not? Maeve met his gaze, her expression unreadable, because it didn't want them to spoil it. He folded his arms. Are you ashamed of us? She flinched. No, Parker, it's not that. Then what is it? I've spent years trying to be someone they could approve of. The first time I showed them who I really was, they shut the door in my face. I guess I just didn't want to give them the chance to do it again with you, with Sadie. The silence that followed was thick. Parker's voice was low. We're not a secret, Maeve. We can't be. I know, she whispered. Then let them see who you really are now, he said, and let them see who we are too. She nodded slowly, her eyes shining. Okay. And just like that, the next chapter began to write itself. Parker adjusted the collar of his only suit jacket, the one he'd worn to every job interview that mattered, and glanced at his reflection in the tall mirror propped against the wall of Maeve's small bedroom. Sadie sat cross-legged on the bed behind him, holding a tube of sparkly lip balm and eyeing him critically. You look like a prince, she announced, but your hair's wrong. He gave her a dry look. Good thing I've got my royal stylist. She giggled and hopped down to grab a comb from the bathroom. Maeve entered a moment later, slipping on one earring and reaching for the other. Her dress was dark silver, understated but elegant, with thin sleeves and a neckline that dipped just enough to make Parker's mouth go dry. She paused when she saw him. You clean up better than I expected, she said, teasing, but there was something in her voice, something warm and admiring that made his stomach twist. Didn't think I owned a tie, did you? He replied, letting Sadie climb onto the chair to reach his hair. I thought you'd borrow one from the diner manager, she said with a grin. I did, he admitted. Maeve laughed, shaking her head as she clipped the final earring into place. You'll be fine, just don't look anyone in the eye too long. They think it's a challenge. He turned to face her fully. You sure you want this, bringing us into that world? She hesitated only a second. Yes, I want you both there. I want them to see who it chose. Sadie, now satisfied with his hair, clapped her hands. Time to go. Maeve knelt beside her and helped her into the red coat Parker had found on clearance the month before. You ready to meet some very serious people who wear shoes that click on marble floors? Sadie held up her glittery snow boots. My shoes go thunk. Perfect, Maeve said, standing again. Let's go make an entrance. The Ellison estate was tucked behind tall hedges and wrought iron gates, sprawling across 2 acres of meticulously trimmed lawns and stone paths. The house wasn't just large, it was imposing. Every window was lit, casting gold across the winter-darkened sky, and valets in formal uniforms opened car doors with mechanical precision. Parker held Maeve's hand tightly as they stepped inside, Sadie between them, clutching her father's fingers with wide eyes. The foyer was marble and chandeliered, filled with guests in gowns and tuxedos, champagne flutes in hand, laughter echoing under vaulted ceilings. Don't let go, Maeve whispered, no matter what happens. A woman with sharp cheekbones and a black velvet dress intercepted them near the base of the staircase. Maeve, she said coolly, you're later than expected. Hi, Mother, Maeve said, her voice even. The woman's gaze dropped to Sadie, then to Parker. And these are my family, Maeve replied. Her mother's lips pressed into a thin line. See. Parker didn't flinch. He bent slightly and extended a hand. Parker Hayes, and this is my daughter Sadie. The woman took his hand like it was a foreign object, then turned away without a word. Maeve's jaw tightened, but she kept walking. Come on, the worst part's over. They moved through the crowd, stopping occasionally for Maeve to greet someone or introduce Parker. Most people were polite. A few weren't, but Parker didn't let go of her hand, and Sadie never left his side. At one point, Maeve's father approached. He was tall, silver-haired, and wore a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I hear you're working on something new, he said to Maeve, swirling his drink. I am, she said, a gallery downtown. Interesting, I wasn't aware you were still pursuing that. I never stopped, she replied. I just stopped asking for your approval. His eyes flicked to Parker. And this is the man who encouraged you. No, she said firmly. This is the man who reminded me how strong I already was. Her father gave a short nod and walked away. Parker exhaled slowly. You okay? Maeve looked up at him. Better than I thought I'd be. Later in the evening, a string quartet began to play, and a few couples drifted onto the dance floor. Maeve turned to Parker, her eyes unreadable. Dance with me. He hesitated. I haven't in years. Neither have I, she said, but I want this memory. He glanced at Sadie, now sitting with a small plate of sweets and drawing quietly with a crayon someone had given her. Then he took Maeve's hand and led her to the edge of the floor. They moved slowly, cautiously at first. Parker's hand settled at the small of her back, hers at his shoulder. The music swelled around them as they found a rhythm that wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. You're not scared of them, he said quietly. Not anymore. You never needed them. She looked up into his eyes. No, I needed you. He leaned down and kissed her not gently, but with the kind of certainty that came from months of quiet glances, shared burdens, and unspoken promises. Around them, the ballroom faded. When they returned home that night, Maeve tucked Sadie into bed and kissed her forehead. Parker watched from the doorway, something tight and unfamiliar in his chest. As she turned out the light and stepped into the hallway, he caught her hand. I don't have a ring, he said. I can't afford one, but that's not going to stop me from asking. She blinked. Parker. Will you marry me? He asked, voice low. Not because we fit or because it's easy, but because can't imagine another morning or night without you in it. She didn't hesitate. Yes, she said. Yes, 1,000 times. They were married in spring. Not in a church, not with ice sculptures or orchestras, but in a garden behind the new gallery Maeve had opened. The flowers were simple, the vows whispered beneath an arch of fairy lights strung between trees. Sadie stood between them, holding both hands, grinning as wide as her cheeks would allow. Maeve wore a dress she'd found in a second-hand shop. Parker wore the same suit jacket from the gala. Their friends from the diner came. So did local artists, neighbors, Sadie's teachers. The crowd wasn't large, but it was full of love. After the ceremony, they danced barefoot in the grass. Maeve's laughter rang out like bells, and Parker held her close, closer than he'd ever held anyone. You changed my whole life, he whispered. I didn't, she said. You just finally got to live the one you were meant to. And when they kissed, beneath the stars and the soft hum of music, Sadie clapped her hands and shouted, Now we're all a forever family. And they were. The sun filtered through gauzy curtains as Maeve stepped into the gallery before opening hours. The scent of fresh paint still lingered in the corners, and the morning light made the hardwood floor glow like honey. She walked past the new installation, an abstract piece, by a young artist Sadie had met and immediately dubbed the Squiggly Rainbow, and adjusted a crooked label beneath a sculpture near the front. Parker entered a moment later, carrying 2 paper bags and a cup tray balanced on one arm. He set everything down on her desk and leaned in to kiss her cheek. "Peach muffins and that tea you like with the awful name," he said. "Sadie wanted the pink frosted donut, so I made a judgment call." Maeve laughed softly. "She's going to be bouncing off the walls all afternoon." "She's with Nora," he said. "They're at the library's craft hour. Apparently, bookmarks are the theme. She'll make 20 and insist we use all of them at once." "Already prepared," Parker replied. "Picked up a second copy of that fairy tale book she keeps sneaking into her backpack." Maeve turned to him, reaching for her tea. "You always think ahead now." "I've got 2 planners, a color-coded calendar, and a child who reminds me daily of what I forgot yesterday. I'm evolving." She studied him for a moment. "You really like working at the school, don't you?" He nodded. "I didn't think I would. But helping keep the place running, seeing Sadie during the day, it's good. And the benefits mean we actually have a savings account now. There's something about seeing you there. You look like you belong." "I finally do." They sat together on the gallery's worn leather sofa, sipping their drinks as the light shifted across the walls. Maeve leaned her head on his shoulder. "I've been thinking about adding a kid-friendly exhibit," she said. "Not just for Sadie, for families who wouldn't usually feel comfortable in a gallery." Parker tilted his head. "What would that look like?" "Interactive pieces. Things they can touch, rearrange, build. Maybe even art classes on Saturdays." He smiled. "You already have an audience. Sadie would bring her entire class." Maeve looked down at her tea. "When I first opened this place, I thought it would be about rebuilding my brother's dream. But now, it feels like it's becoming something else. Something ours." Parker wrapped an arm around her. "It is." Later that week, they hosted a small community open house. Children darted between easels and sculptures, smudging finger paint on aprons and hands. Parents lingered near the snack table, chatting with Maeve about upcoming events. Parker manned the donation box, offering quiet thanks to each visitor. As the sun dipped low, casting ribbons of amber through the tall windows, Maeve watched Sadie show her latest painting to an elderly couple. She stood tall, explaining the swirls like a seasoned curator. "She's growing so fast," Maeve said. Parker came to stand beside her. "She told me yesterday she wants to be a scientist, artist, ballerina." "That tracks." He nudged her gently. "You know, we never took a honeymoon." Maeve raised an eyebrow. "We barely had a wedding budget." "I've been saving," he said. "I was thinking, maybe we take a trip, just the 3 of us. Somewhere with tide pools and hammocks and no cell reception." She blinked in surprise. "You planned a trip?" "I have a folder," he said, "with tabs." "Who are you?" "The husband of a woman who rebuilt her life from scratch and made space for me in it," he said. "Of course, I'm planning ahead. I'm not missing a second." Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. Instead, she pulled him into a kiss that was soft and certain, the kind that came from knowing you were exactly where you belonged. They boarded a plane 2 weeks later. Sadie sat between them, headphones clamped over her ears and a coloring book open on the tray table. Maeve leaned against Parker's arm, watching clouds drift past the window. Their rented cottage overlooked a quiet beach in a town where no one cared what you wore to dinner. They built sandcastles, collected shells, and watched the sun dip into the water every evening from their porch. Parker taught Sadie how to skip stones. Maeve showed her how to paint the waves. One night, after Sadie had fallen asleep on a blanket under the stars, Parker and Maeve sat on the porch swing with bare feet and warm mugs. "I didn't think I'd ever be this happy again," she said. "You don't have to say that." I want to, she replied, because it's true. I thought happiness like this ended with my brother, but it didn't. It changed shape. It found me again. I was afraid to want anything more than survival, he said. But then you showed up with daisies and changed everything. They sat there as the ocean whispered below them, and the stars blinked overhead. Back home, life didn't become perfect, but it became theirs. Maeve's gallery grew, expanding into the neighboring space. Parker became the facilities coordinator at the school, organizing after-school programs and building a community garden. Sadie's artwork began to appear at the gallery's front desk, proudly labeled in blocky handwriting. One Saturday, as they unpacked groceries in the kitchen, Sadie tugged on Maeve's sleeve. "I want to make you a present," she said, "but I need help." Maeve set down a carton of eggs. "What kind of present?" "A painting of our family." Maeve crouched beside her. "What does our family look like?" Sadie held up 4 fingers. "You, Daddy, me, and the new baby." Maeve blinked. "What new baby?" Sadie grinned. "The one in your tummy." Parker, frozen at the fridge, turned slowly. "Wait, what?" Maeve laughed, stunned. How could she possibly? Sadie shrugged. "My teacher said moms get tired and eat pickles when they grow babies. You've been eating all the pickles." Parker looked at Maeve. "Is she right?" Maeve hesitated, then reached for his hand. "I was going to wait for the doctor's appointment to be sure, but think she might be." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight as Sadie giggled and danced around their legs. Months later, they welcomed a baby boy with Maeve's eyes and Parker's quiet calm. Sadie stood proudly beside the crib, cradling a hand-knitted hat she'd made at school. Their home became louder, messier, fuller, but it never stopped being filled with love. And every year, on the anniversary of the day Parker gave a stranger daisies in the rain, they returned to that hospital bench. Not to dwell on the past, but to honor what had grown from it. Maeve would bring fresh flowers, Parker would hold her hand, and Sadie would chase her little brother through the courtyard. They had built something real, something enduring. And they never let go.